Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bridging the Human Divide. I'm your host, Shera Sever. I'm an organizational culture and leadership consultant, a life mastery coach, and founder of Igniting the Spark. Bridging the Human Divide is my newest series that I began in July. And it's a series of weekly conversations with everyday change makers committed to moving from the deep polarization that we are currently experiencing in our country, in our communities, even workplaces, organizations, and oftentimes personal relationships. The intent of this series is to invite all to gather around the fire of collective heart intelligence so that we can all move forward together with more grace, understanding, dialogue, and engaged compassion in action. I am so delighted today to welcome my longtime friend and colleague who I met in Northern California, Nikki Rae, who is a holistic health practitioner, an animal advocate, speaker, and author. And today she's going to share perspectives on how we can embrace the shadow, both personally and collectively, to reach a level of deeper compassion for ourselves and for others as we stand in our sovereignty while honoring our interconnectedness. What a wonderful topic, and welcome, welcome, Nikki.
What a treat to be here, Shera. Thank you so much for creating this very necessary platform for the sparks, literally, that we come together creating more than we would individually. So it's a treat to be here. Thanks.
Yes, I'm so happy we're able to do this. So I think we're just going to jump right in, Nikki, because I know everyone's going to be really excited to hear a little bit more about you and your perspective and practices. But I'd like to start just with what made you say yes to this topic?
Well, I love the topic of it because I feel it really is a very vital time to have this conversation. We're in the midst of a destruction of all the old ways, the old paradigms, the density, the dysfunction that have been created and fueling our systems and structures for so long. It's crumbling. And that's the time to really use your innovative, creative sparks, right? To really start to say, okay, how can we move forward in a way that is inclusive and sustainable and healthy and compassionate at the foundation, right? Because that didn't necessarily hold in our current reality, right? So this is a really beautiful conversation to have at this time, because we're all kind of stirring, saying, okay, now what, right? And so when we can weave all of us back together, then we're starting from a very healthy foundation.
Yes, I love that you use that analogy of weaving, because that when I first created the series Wednesday Weavings, it was back last spring, and that's exactly what I wanted to do, is like, you know, weaving our ideas, our creativities, and weaving what's emerging. I like that you mentioned that, you know, everything is crumbling, and we're all asking some very important questions. I am noticing, though, that what's creating the divide is that there's a large portion of, I'm going to say, humanity, of the world's populations, and I see it in our own communities, that are holding on to the old structures. And my belief that is like holding on is actually part of what is creating more of this polarization and more of this divide. And I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit on that, because it seems to segue right into the core of your topic today.
It really is, because the gripping process is out of fear. And it's the thinking aspect of the human. You know, I'm doing a series on my social media about the ego. And the ego's not bad, but and we are not our egos. We have an ego that does the thinking, and its whole perspective is that it is alone in a universe that is potentially out to get it, and it has to fight for everything. It has to hoard. Everything is a threat. And so that part of humanity, our ego thinking self, has been running the show for so long. And so it doesn't know what's beyond the veil. It doesn't know what else could happen behind the curtain, so it's petrified. It doesn't know anything different. Most of us were born into this dysfunction, and it was normalized by our parents and cultures, so we're like, okay, well, I guess this is life, right? So we don't know anything beyond that. And if our egos, if our thinking part has had such a grip on our interpretation of reality for so long, this can be absolutely life-threatening change right now. Because it's, wow, it's black abyss, it's unknown, it's uncertain, right? A lot of us like spreadsheets and to have, lists and have everything neatly organized. And that's what this corona pandemic has given people a chance to do, is to get still and stop and say, okay, am I distracting myself? Am I fully present with what is? And so the gripping that we're seeing is part of the dysfunction, because it's born out of the ego. It's born out of a fear-based interpretation of reality. And that's what a lot of these systems and structures have also been built out on.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's come up in a number of conversations that we've had. I mean, this is very, very basic and very fundamental. Mm-hmm. And just understanding, being comfort with not knowing, being comfortable with not knowing, and how hard that is for most human beings, and how different practices and mindsets and daily habits can actually change that. We're not going to get into, systemic challenges today. This is more on the shadow work that we were going to talk about. So that's what I want to really move into. So given the fear, the ego, oh my gosh, I can't let go of what's familiar and what's comfortable, and, my side of the street, I can't let go of that. Right. How can embracing the shadow, and why don't we just start personally, but if you want to venture out to collectively, yeah. I'm totally on board with that.
Great.
Yeah, and maybe even describe the shadow. I'm assuming everyone that will listen to this understands, but we might want to just define it for everybody.
Sure. Yeah, so the shadow aspect is any aspect of ourselves or our culture that is considered unsavory, if you will, and it's not been looked at, it's kind of been shoved aside. It's something that oftentimes when we're small children, we don't understand something. And so we have to make a survival choice in the moment and say, okay, well, let's just push that down because I tried this personality trait and I was yelled at for it. So I'm going to just push that part of myself down, push my needs down, push whatever that was down because it didn't get me anything I wanted. And so now this pushed down aspect is a shadow, and it will grow. And in fact, it will dictate our choices. It will be our point of attraction on a lot of things. It's literally like the veil that we interpret reality through, because pushing it down doesn't make it go away. If you look at physics, what you fight, you strengthen, what you resist persists. So by anything you're pushing away, rejecting, denying, and even ignoring, turning your back on, that choice to ignore it is keeping you connected to it. And so this shadow becomes this larger than life aspect of the experience. And as we're seeing right now, humanity's shadows of abuse and violence and suppression elevate to a point where they need to be seen. And we're at a time in human evolution where the vibration's rising. For those of us on the energy spectrum, understand that we're in an ascension process, yes, moving out of control and into a state of more lightness and unity consciousness of knowing we're all connected. So anything vibrationally that doesn't match with this unity consciousness is going to bubble to the surface. And it needs to be helped. It needs to be dealt with. And I love what you had said about, we don't want to get into the topic of the structures per se, but the solutions are the same. The first introductory aspect to incorporate when working with shadows is just being curious. It's just curiosity. I'm so curious. I'm curious. What are my shadows? I'm curious what my culture shadows, my ancestor, my family shadows. There's shadows in all things. And so just being curious really opens the door. It kind of gets you through the back door, actually.
That's perfect. Let's just do a pause there, because cultivating curiosity is one of the #1 leadership competencies that I introduce in some of the work that I do with organizational leaders and community leaders, and just the value of curiosity, superseding assumptions, number one, which creates all kinds of conflict and misunderstandings. But you brought in a lot of gems, so I just want to back up for a few moments. I love how you describe the shadow, and I always see it as like the elephant in the room, right? Yeah, I think that's another way to describe it. Or it's that beautiful piece of us that has a rich teaching for us. And you mentioned individually and collectively, a rich teaching for us, but we haven't quite yet learned, or we don't know how to embrace the teaching, or grasp the teaching, or even accept the teaching. So I guess this is where we get to learn a little bit more about how you help others embrace the shadow.
So beautifully put. Being curious disarms. You disarm your own experience, but also you now have an energy about you that you're disarming others. We're all psychic. Not everybody knows that they are. They just know that they're feeling something really uncomfortable in this place or with this person or with this conversation, but we all have senses that are starting to come online more than ever. But when you're curious, you can disarm yourself and others. And what you start to notice is that when you're open to discovering and witnessing the shadow, right? Because there is no such thing as dark. Dark is just the absence of light. And so when something you stop running from this unsavory personality trait or behavior or belief, and you stop and you fully face it. You say, I see you, without judgment, without resistance and rejection and criticism or shoulds. We don't want to should all over ourselves. Just get the shoulds out of the way. But you just look at it and you just face this now festering boil that has been denied for so long, and it's holding so much energy of rejection that when you're fully sitting present with it and you acknowledge it, there's the alchemy, the energy of pain that has been growing and growing with this shadow aspect that just wants to be loved. It just wants to be seen and validated. How often have we felt unvalidated in a relationship or a situation, and we just shrunk and felt so horrible? Well, this shadow has spent its whole energetic experience feeling that, and reinforced as we continually reject it. So it just fully facing it and saying, okay, I see you. I see that you're valid. I understand that you can feel the alchemy. And so that alchemy now becomes this transformation. I love that you called it this beautiful, rich piece of us, because we are trapping so much creative potential in that heavy energy. We're considering it bad and wrong, but there's so much that's going to be unleashed, so much beauty and healing and innovation and ideas and thirst for life and new perspectives that we now, again, weave with, because we're not pushing it away. We're no longer trying to be separate. So it's bridging us into our unity, which is who we truly are.
Exactly.
And then from that place, we have a more, I love the word rich, we have a more rich perspective. And we see that on the global stage, as well as in our personal lives.
So let's just do a pause, because that was so much. And what I'm really wanting to do in the next step is maybe share some actual practices that listeners can actually walk away with. But you brought up a lot of information about how the shadow plays a role in our day-to-day interactions. And, I want to talk a little bit for a moment just about spiritual bypassing, because I notice a lot of that happening too. I mean, you also mentioned ascension process, and that's actually what's happening on the planet. And, we need to integrate this shadow. First of all, see it, welcome it into the conversation. So these uncomfortable feelings, you mentioned everyone is psychic, these uncomfortable feelings that we're having in certain situations or conversations that are super, super polarized. Right. And rather than writing the person off or blocking the person, or, for on social media, or I love this line, it's just, I don't feel resonance. I think, to me, those are like cues to, again, there is a gem in here, rather than just, like you said, we're all related, we're all connected, rather than just passing this around. It's like, gee, I wonder what it is that I could learn from this, rather than polarize or separate or divide. So I just want to bring that up, because a lot of times what we do is just, we just write people off, right? We ghost them, and that's not what we need right now in this time of so much chaos.
Yeah.
So Nikki, when you're in your day-to-day activities or actually working with a client, just how are you helping others see and embrace and integrate the shadow so that she can become a great ally? Because that's what I see the shadow as.
And it really is. It really is the underrepresented gem in our pockets, right? So I feel like for all of us going forward, the greatest way to help heal the world is to do the work for ourselves. Really identify our own shadows. Because if anyone's ever done shadow work triggers this mushroom cloud of very heavy energy that can be almost debilitating. And it very much distorts our interpretation of reality. And so in order for us to show up as a healing agent of change, we have to do our own work, because shadows aren't necessarily grandiose. They can be small distortions, right? So doing the personal work first. But in terms of supporting others on their own healing path, again, is starting out with being curious and then having clarity. So sitting fully aware of this shadow aspect of yourself. I don't think you need to know exactly when it started and all that. I think you can just end up in this cranial piece, which isn't necessary. This is really energy and emotion that we're working with. So if you look at the word emotion, it's emotion, energy in motion. And so most of us have some kind of suppressed emotion from some issue, whether it was yesterday or when you were 2, or even in other expressions of you were passed down from grandma. The point is, energy just wants to move. It just wants to move. So just having clarity and just visualizing and seeing it. And then from there, I kind of call it the 4 C's. And so the next one is also
the 4 seasons.
The 4 C's. So it's curiosity, clarity, compassion, and coming together.
Okay, keep going. So we've got, I love that. And I love that you mentioned too, let's not get cranial.
Right.
We don't need to analyze where the shadow came from or when it emerged, but let's see her now as she. And
it's part of the ego thinking mind, and it's very clever. It can find a way to be like, oh boy, let's turn this into another way to boost my identity by knowing all the things, right? So no, this is about feeling. This is starting to become a feeling being, right? And so you have curiosity, and then you have clarity. You fully witness. Clearly, 2020 is giving us a chance to be really clear. Then we have compassion. And what I like to do is view these shadow aspects as a 3-year-old child whose arms have been outstretched, wanting a hug and being denied, right? Visualize that. Really feel the pain of that, you guys, because that's a huge part of our healing forward, is we want to stay in the cranial and be like, oh yeah, that just wasn't right. Let's see what we can do to repair it and move forward. No, you've got to feel it. You've got to feel the energy of that wounded part of you, whether it was an infant, a 2-year-old, 4-year-old last week. Feel the emotion that really needed to have airtime. Let it move through you. It feels like it can kill you, especially if it's old. Let it consume you like a flame. It's going to shift all of the frequency of your cells, your bones, your tissues, everything. And from that place, that energy just wanted to move. Now you have alchemized and integrated.
I love that.
Yeah, having the compassion and just feeling and maybe visualize yourself holding yourself, do something to really validate this.
So the self-compassion piece, why is it so difficult for so many human beings to just do something you make it sound so simple, just to show us some compassion for self. An interview I was just part of a couple weeks ago, one of the things that came out is that all of our behavior is either an act of love or a call for love.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're sharing right now. So what if somebody feels comfortable? It's like, oh, this is, I'm not going to do this. I'm an adult. And so how do you encourage others to just, again, these are like, these little tips that we can carry in our magic backpack as we're moving through these chaotic, unprecedented, mysterious times.
Yeah.
I'm calling, these are our survival tools for depolarization, right?
Yes. Oh, so well put. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when we look at, say, the experiences that we're having day to day right now with the polarization of the mask and the vaccine, like all the things, the areas of our day to day living that are so hot red button items, when we're faced with differing viewpoints, if you look at the amount of reactivity we have to differing viewpoints, it's triggering the fear, the survival, our survival. We are tribal beings, and there's a part of us that gets activated and afraid if our community doesn't reflect back to us the reality that we're seeing so clearly. Like, how can you not see what I see? We were just delivered the same information. How are you interpreting it differently? That's very scary. Because in our ancestral times, our survival depended upon being accepted into a community. So I think really being aware of that and understanding that you're going to feel that at some point, and the guy next to you is going to feel it too. So that can help you get quicker into the place of compassion. I think everything we're going through in life right now is another invitation to show us where the road to compassion might be blocked. And we can cultivate.
Yeah, this is great what you just said about the community piece, because how can you not see that? And then it's having you've got your 4 C's. I want to add a C to that, and you can maybe put that into your formula. I think it comes along with curiosity, but that courage piece. It's like, community, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Or community, I want to feel safe enough to share with you what I'm experiencing and seeing, and having the courage to speak up, because if you don't, then what you're doing is feeding unintegrated shadow again. That's how I've seen it and have experienced it. So let's, here I am in my company, and I'm leading a number of pretty intense projects, and there is a lot of I'm just going to call division right now among like how we're supposed to move forward on this. There's different ideologies. So here I am in my office, and I can just do something like that for myself, even as a powerful leader of thousands of people, just giving myself some compassion and helping others do the same thing. These are important tools for these times.
Very valuable. And again, I think it all boils back to the first tool, which is just acknowledge that that's what people are experiencing, is their own personal shadow. So back to the point of, you can have one situation play out, and then 15 people watching this situation play out, and they're all being triggered, but they have a different trigger. Like, they have a different thing that's being triggered within them. That's because on the human spectrum, we're all being called into a higher level of individual consciousness. So all of our own densities being brought up. I might have trauma around feeling like nature is an unsafe place and my body can't be trusted. That's what my bubble of trigger is going to be, because that's what my shadow is. The guy next to me might have come from a long line of oppressive and controlling dictators. So that's what their trigger is going to be. And over here, this person is petrified that, they have a history of really unintelligent people taking all their resources. So they're really freaked out about not having what they need because of other people. So other people are a threat. So you see that in one setting, so many people can have a different interpretation because of their own unique shadows. So the most critical piece is to, again, know that that's what's happening. And then you're not going to react and judge and criticize and condemn someone for their individual experience, because that's another trigger point, is that we have been told from day one that our feelings are wrong and can't be trusted. And so when you're in a trigger point and you're feeling like your whole survival issues are being like activated, your cells are vibrating with the fear of, this virus is going to kill you and everyone you know. If that's your truth, and you've got someone over here telling you that your truth is wrong, here's a whole new trigger. What do you mean my truth? So no. that is not a healthy way to move forward with unity. So to, again, understand everybody's own unique shadows are being activated right now. And the best we can do is hold space for that without judgment, wanting to push them or pull them out of it.
I love it.
For
Yeah,
them.
that was an incredible example, because that is happening everywhere.
We need to validate for people that what they're feeling, help people remember that what they feel is truth. You know, my truth is different than your truth. My truth is different today than it was 10 years ago, but it doesn't make it wrong. Okay. We need to remember that as a human species,
right?
Our feelings are wise and not to be
I love that, Nikki. I mean, that's such a good example. So I want to go back to that in just a second. And remind me, what is the fourth C?
The fourth one is coming together.
Okay.
That's so hippie, but
well, here it is. So why don't we just use that example, because it's, you know, I mean, we've got an election coming up in what, 80 days, or we've got the COVID, and, you know, there's theories and perspectives and facts and partial facts all over, you know, it spans the spectrum globally. But that was a really good example that, you know, COVID's going to kill you, and stay afraid and take all these precautions, versus COVID is a hoax. I mean, that's the 180 degree. So coming together is your fourth C. How do you address that? How do you address that in a conversation or in an interaction?
So it really is kind of the apex piece, because all those other components are necessary to build to get to that point. Unless you're in this nirvana state and you're kind of just up here observing the human situation, and you're not bringing any of your own stuff to the table, which if you're watching this video, you're likely in this human condition for a reason. So, so really you don't have to be a master at any of this stuff. You can even just attempt it. And I think being curious about your ability to show up for other people is another superpower, because we're all messy. We're going to be messy. And I think we get into analysis paralysis, where we're like, I can't do all the things perfectly, so I'm just not going to do anything. And that doesn't serve ourselves. We're all kind of wiggling and growing into a new 2.0 version of ourselves. So coming together will naturally happen. That's the thing, is we don't have to effort, push, and pull. I can get into the feminine, masculine, energetic spectrum that we have been living in this polarized world, and how we're imbalanced in our own individual and collective expressions of masculine and feminine, but I don't think we need to go down that route. But just know. What's that?
Not today.
Right. That could be a different day. But just know that. Yeah. So the attributes we're all being called to allow in is compassion, receptivity, intuition. Intuition is like oxygen, you guys. We really need to develop and strengthen our intuition and discernment. But like really allowing these attributes to start to weave in, so that we are a more whole, complete person, and then we can support one another in handling all the things, because I feel like there's going to be more unsavory information coming through the pipelines. And so building these muscles early on, so that we ourselves are not being triggered and reactive, provides greater space. But even if you are triggered, have compassion for yourself in that moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love so much what you're sharing about, it's just an act of compassion, right? And you know, obviously we've moved beyond the name calling or make wrong. We're not that comes before the cultivating curiosity. So we've moved beyond that step. We've actually started this embracing shadow process with curiosity, as you said.
Yeah.
Two more things I want to touch upon, if you will engage with me on this. One is the collective shadow, and then the other is, you mentioned ascension, and I'm okay definitely going. And some will understand and be in alignment with that, and others will cultivate curiosity around that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Exactly. So the collective shadow it could be a series in and of itself, and I'm sure there are podcasts out there that are addressing it. But just for the sake of today's conversation, how do you, again, in your day-to-day or working with clients and groups, how do you go ahead and introduce the idea of embracing the collective shadow and taking steps towards healing the collective shadow?
Great question. So I love the quote by Einstein that says the most important question a person asks in their life is whether they think the universe is hostile or friendly, and some variation of that. So that shadow aspect has been perpetuated throughout the human consciousness. There's this, we're phasing out of it. Ishmael was a book I read many moons ago, and it kind of touches on this.
I love it. Yes.
This belief of that the world is hostile and you have to fend for yourself, and everybody's a threat and everything. So that is the kind of the undercurrent that is really starting to come up right now, that was always there, but it was off people's radar because they were born into their little cushy reality, and we had a TV and the water turns on every time you turn the spigot. And so what I understand about conscious creation, which is where this ascension process is taking us, is to being conscious creators, because we're very creative and we're creating everything all the time anyway. We don't know we're doing it. We don't know that we're the ones that are writing the story of our lives, even the collective story. But once we reclaim our role as a creator of the world and our own individual experiences, then we can identify, okay, am I operating off of this belief? Do I believe the universe is out here to support me, or do I feel like I really have to hold my own? So when you look at that, you'll know your own individual placement. But by facing it, whatever it is, you elevate your consciousness to a new place. And now you have a new interpretation of reality. And I had a different stream of thought that just comes.
That's okay. I saw that happening. So let me that's okay. It happens all the time. But how do we, would you recommend then that we go ahead and, because I read Ishmael many years ago as well, and it actually, you just reminded me that might be some good bedtime reading for now.
Yeah.
How do we go ahead then and adopt a position that the world is a friendly place? Or are you recommending that we do that? Or are you recommending that we decide for ourselves whether it's a friendly or hostile place?
Well, that I love that you kind of brought up that opportunity, because we are, as again, individual creators, we have that right at any moment to choose. And everything is a series of choices from moment to moment. So when you look at your own inherent beliefs, like what's underneath your own hood, what's been operating for you, you start to get a little more curious as to, okay, well, why I keep having this experience, and what's that about? And I keep dating the same person in a different body. What's that about? Or I keep bouncing checks, or I keep finding aggressive bosses. What's that about? So you just look at the matrix of your own life and say, where are there patterns? Because honestly, everything is a reflection. And so once we learn that relationship piece, we can determine, okay, this is a pattern, this is a pattern. Now this might be from that person I dated when I was in 3rd grade and they did that. So you start to get curious and you start to look into your own belief patterns.
Okay.
Another thought.
Yeah.
Again.
So
yeah.
on a collective level, then it's like, because there is a collective shadow, and I think that's part of the collective shadow is emerging, and that is what has amplified this divide that we're experiencing again in so many places, and obviously in the political sphere, and around COVID and just all kinds of things. It's so, just if you want to entertain just one more time, again, how can we as individuals contribute to embracing the collective shadow?
Yeah.
And embracing it, like, okay, like you said, we're all in this mess together. Yes. And just like having compassion for that, recognizing that just like me, you're in this mess as well. I mean,
this is a great piece. There is, so there are, as we mentioned, there are multiple experiences happening simultaneously. And
right.
So when you look at what you're reacting to, what's most uncomfortable for you, you're in a loop with something. And you're going to stay in that loop until you learn the messages that it's here to deliver for you. So with that being said, when you stop and you look at the pattern, the loop that you're in, the discomfort, the challenges, you're really struggling with all these people who are not wearing masks. When you stop and you look at this issue of what does it mean for you? What is the underlying belief that you have? What threat are you feeling as a result of this? Peel the layers away, get to the very core bottom of it, and you'll see that little, I had a shaman once tell me, you have a basket of rotting avocados on the bottom and you keep putting beautiful avocados on top, but there's still flies because you have rotting on avocados on bottom. So dig down to the very core, because you're being triggered for a reason. Like, this is showing you where you have holes in your sense of sovereignty and your connection to a higher wisdom. So get to the depths of what is underneath that. Face it. Again, do the shadow piece, fully face it and feel compassion and do the work. From there, the alchemy happens and the transmutation. And then you were vibrating down here in that fear space. And now you're up here. Your consciousness has elevated and you're not triggered by the mask situation anymore. It might be like, okay, we need to help educate people so that they understand. Like, that could be your new interpretation rather than, oh, these people, right? So you just become empowered. You've taken your power back. If we get triggered and all flipped out and we're reacting from that place, we're giving our power away. So all those people's, places, and things. But when you can stay in a centered space and you have fuller, more broad perspective of the issues at hand, you say, oh, okay, it was poking at a wound that I had deep inside where people around me were doing whatever. You know, you kind of get to your own individual piece of the pie.
Yeah,
and
I hear
you're at a place to be of heightened healing service to the collective rather than reacting and judging, which is only keeping you in that loop.
Yeah, may that be so, that we can actually get there where we can have that level of compassion, like you said, and just understanding that there's a trigger here rather than, to me, it goes back to what you said earlier too, the ego and the self-righteousness and the comfort in being right and the comfort of holding on and gripping. So just repeat those 4 C's again so that we can, that's something that we can, walk out the door with. Our 8-year-old could actually do the same.
Yes,
so
totally, absolutely.
What are those 4 C's to help embrace the shadow and depolarize in these times?
Yeah. So the first is curiosity. And that's really for all things, not just the shadow, but really just being curious about why the cashier just snapped at you. Just curiosity. And then clarity. By stopping being curious, you're now enabling yourself to fully see. Because you can't be curious and be like, I'm curious, and then run away. No, when you're curious, you're engaged and you're like, okay, I'm curious. So you have clarity now, full spectrum clarity. The third one is compassion. And from there, you fully integrate and you connect with and you have to feel. Compassion is really about feeling the energies and the emotions of what's going through so that you fully get it, you empathize. And then coming together, which is just what happens naturally. Yeah. Sure, I want to say this is one of the nuggets I wanted to weave in before that disappeared, but feeling good. I think one of your questions was, kind of what's behind it all. Ultimately, we're all wanting to live in a world and in a life that feels good. So when you choose the best feeling option, it's literally going to put you on the path of your highest potential. And when you think of what feels good, it doesn't feel good to steal from people. It doesn't feel good to lie to people. If you think about it, those might be feeding a wound, which doesn't feel good. It's kind of numbing out. So I don't want people to get confused over, well, burglars feel good when they rob. No, it's an adrenaline rush. It doesn't feel good. When I talk about feeling good, it's like a
natural
an enrichment. You get lit up, whatever lights you up. When you follow what lights you up, you're walking with lit up footprints, and you're going to ignite light ups in other people who are like, what is that person doing? Because I feel really good around them, right? So when we make that kind of our North Star, let feeling good be your mode of choice in all the things that you do, and you'll go through all the different fabulous paths that line up for you to perpetuate feeling good.
I love that, to feel good. And to remember, no spirit, in our feeling good, no spiritual bypassing. Do we want to go back to those 4 C's?
Oh, yes. Good. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that
curiosity piece and the clarity piece, and the engagement piece of, like you said, it's like, wow, I wonder why this person is barking at me. And it's like, maybe their mother just got diagnosed with 4-stage cancer. I mean, engaging people in what's happening for you, is part of that depolarization process and part of that, again, bridging the divide. So this has been fabulous. I just want to, let's see, now if people want to reach you, it's therootofallpeace.com. Is that right?
That's my website, therootofallpeace.com, and I have a link to my book, information on that, and then all of my social media pages. I'm on Vibe It Up here on Facebook. I have Nikki _Rae _ Vibe It Up 999 on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, all the places.
So we'll add that in the comment section below this video on Facebook, and then people can reach you. So thank you so much for just, just tossing these ideas around and just like, let's become friends with our shadow, other shadows, and the collective shadow. I'm sure there's a lot of conversation and could go much deeper. But again, these are just things that we can walk out the door with and implement today. And that's really what we need. We need these tools in our magic backpack, as I like to say. So I just want to say next week, join us again at the same time. And my guest is Katrina Vaillancourt, who many know in our communities. And the topic is very similar, but she's going to approach it through her work in empathy and honesty. And I also want to invite everybody to consider becoming part of my morning mastermind group. It starts September 1st. It's from 8 a.m. to approximately 8:40 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday, Pacific time. And it will, I'm just going to say, get your ass in gear. But but what I mean by that is, we are in unprecedented times. We're all having to pivot in our businesses, in our life, just in our all of our systems. So I've got a program I launched last June, and I'm offering it again. And it's a manifestation program. It's a program also to just clear these beliefs. You will also be supported and witnessed every morning throughout the month of September, and it's only $69. So I will put that in the link as well. I hope some of you will consider joining. And again, Nikki Rae, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get the links in the comment section. And hey, everybody, your shadow is your ally. So embrace her.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Shera. It's been a treat.
Yes.
For all the magic that we co-create.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.